Hello, my name is Preston Thomas, and this is episode 55 of The Way of Jesus. This podcast is being recorded for the July 2025 broadcast. This episode addresses the question, how close are we to the end times? Throughout the Bible, we find many references to a time of tribulation, which the prophet Daniel described as the time of the end. There are many other names by which the Bible signifies and describes this time. They include the latter days, the latter years, the day of the Lord, the day of God, the great day of God the Almighty, and the day of wrath. The many references to the end times by a variety of prophets throughout both the Old and the New Testaments tend to provide a high degree of certainty that this is a time that will surely come to pass. The dire nature and significance of this time was succinctly characterized by Daniel as a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. If we believe these end times prophecies, the question naturally arises, when will this be? How close are we to the events depicted by these prophecies? In seeking to answer this question, we may begin by noting two important facts that are relevant to this time. First, after a rebellion in 70 A.D., the Roman Empire under Titus destroyed the Jewish nation and dispersed the Jews to foreign lands. Thus Israel ceased to exist as a separate nation. Since the end times prophecies are centered on Jerusalem and Israel, this meant that for over 2,000 years it was impossible for these prophecies to be fulfilled. However, all this changed in May 1948 when the nation of Israel came back into being. Since that time, the fulfillment of the end times prophecies has become possible. The second thing we know is that the end times have yet to appear. It is clear that the many fearsome events of the time of the end have not yet come to pass. They loom somewhere in our future. But when will this be? Here we are in the dark. Perhaps the best way to approach this question is to understand the present times. Does the present condition of our world point to a settled and peaceful future, or to an uncertain and threatening future? Peaceful and settled times point to a peaceful future, while threatening times point to the possibility that we may be approaching the time of the end. A clear-eyed and honest view of our present world does indicate that times are becoming ripe for the tyranny, conflict, war, and destruction that occur at the time of the end. Two of these indicators are the materialism and unsettledness of today's world. Presently, we are living in the closing chapters of a materialistic age. This materialistic and mechanistic viewpoint was advanced by 19th century atheistic scientists and philosophers such as Darwin, Freud, and Marx. The spectacular advances of the physical sciences have fostered a deterministic outlook that leaves no room for free will and spiritual values. Their materialistic attitude that the only reality is the physical world still dominates the minds of unthinking men and women of modern times. Many live their lives exclusively on a physical plane and are motivated by purely materialistic ideas and values. This unbalanced viewpoint ignores or denies the reality of both mind and spirit. It engenders a self-centered and self-serving attitude that is bereft of unifying values such as love, service, forgiveness, peace, tolerance, and altruism. This materialistic philosophy leads to animosity, disintegration, conflict, and war. But this belief that physical energy is the only reality is merely a passing phase in human philosophy. It is true that God created the material world, and it is governed by deterministic laws. However, He also created a higher world of spiritual ideas, ideals, and values. In this transcendent world of mind and spirit, we have the free will to make moral and spiritual choices and to govern our lives. The world of mind and spirit is above the world of energy matter and can dominate and direct it. This spiritual world constantly injects spontaneity into the mechanism of the physical world. It is the function of wisdom to coordinate and harmonize the findings of these two diverse realities in our life experience. This materialistic viewpoint fosters a great unsettledness in today's world. On the international plane, there are presently numerous actual and potential conflicts between nations that threaten world peace. A few of these include Russia versus Ukraine, Britain, France, Germany, the Baltic states, and other nations of the European Union versus Russia, Israel versus Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, the United States versus Russia, Iran, and the Houthis, North Korea versus South Korea, India versus Pakistan and China versus Taiwan. The European Union itself faces growing dissent from various members such as Hungary and Slovakia, and is seriously threatened with dissolution. Within nations and national groupings, there are also many conflicting forces that threaten division. In the United States, there is much animosity and division between various groupings such as rural versus urban, religious versus secular, and seekers of individual freedom versus advocates of government regulation and control. In European countries, there is great internal division between the established leadership and various populist fronts. This is true in major countries such as Britain, France, and Germany, and in smaller countries such as the Netherlands and Romania. On the individual plane, there is also great unsettledness. We live in a time when individuals must endure the constant economic upheavals, moral cross-currents, and sociologic riptides of an ever-changing world. Many have become humanely dislocated. They are anxious, restless, fearful, uncertain, and unsettled. And all of this unsettledness on the international, national, and individual planes provides fertile ground for the Antichrist conqueror, whose rise to power initiates the end times. In summary, Israel ceased to exist in 70 AD and came back into being in 1948. During this time, the fulfillment of the end times prophecies was impossible. However, since that date, the actuality of the events of the time of the end has become possible and lurks somewhere in our future. When this will be, we do not know. What we can know is the present condition of our world. We may ask, do present conditions point to a peaceful future, or do they suggest that the world is headed for troublous times. Two present-day phenomena, materialism and international unsettledness, suggest the latter. They indicate the world is becoming ripe for the wars and destruction of the end times. And these are only two of the negative and threatening conditions of our present-day world. There are other more serious conditions. They will be discussed in the next podcast. This concludes episode 55. Thank you for watching and listening. If you found this podcast helpful, please like and subscribe. Until next time, remember that Jesus taught us to maintain a positive and joyous attitude, even when faced with difficulties and threatening conditions. He directed us to let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid, and urged us to be of good cheer, and to rejoice and be exceedingly glad.